You can't run from God. You can't hide from your calling. God has put his unique fingerprint upon your life. Listen, there are people that will only get saved because of you. Billy Graham says that 90% of all of us will never share our faith one time in our entire lifetime. I would never have believed that, but my buddy Steve Shante was in the room at the time when he heard him say it. He's my prayer partner. He said, Chuck, he said some things that just blew me away. There's stuff in the kingdom of God that only you can do. There's stuff as you as a couple that will only get done in the kingdom that only you as a couple together can do. There's stuff in this mano-a-mano friendships that you have, either gal to gal, guy to guy. They're only going to happen and forged when you do it. You see, God has divinely designed you, and it's not humanly developed. We need to fully grasp this truth because we experience freedom and joy like we've never seen before. God has made you just the way he wanted you. He has designed you to reflect his purpose. He has shaped you in his spiritual significance. Your piece of the puzzle only looks right when it's plugged into where it belongs. In verse 18 of 1 Corinthians 12 it says, but in the fact God has arranged the parts of the body, every one of them, just as he's wanted them to be. You're not an accident. Point 4. Each piece is distinct. Verses 5 through 17. Paul next speaks to those who are filled with pride. Verse 21. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. They don't need you. A speck of dust blows in your eye. Your finger instinctively rubs at the eye. There's no debate about the finger, whether or not it wants to help. As the eye is rubbed, several fingers pull down the eyelid, and the eye waters, causing the speck to flush out. Without the hand, including its specific functions, the fingers, the irritant, would have never been removed. You look at your piece of the puzzle and compare it to those around you, you will see it's different. Yours is designed differently. The shape of your piece and the location where it fits is the picture of where God in the church, God in your relationships, has a distinct plan for everybody else. I love Vince Lombardi. My mom, not being a football fan, somehow got hold of the Lombardi methods. She raised me on Lombardi time. You know what Lombardi time means? And I have women in my household. I am not I don't have sons. All my sons are adopted through relationships. I was raised, if you're on time, you're late. If you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. You can't, after 17 years of that beaten into your head, you drive the rest of the world crazy. But that's how my mama raised me. Okay? It's breeding. You know? That's how I function. Well, I love Vince Lombardi. He was a great coach. And he had some methods. But here's something about him you might not know. He was often quoted about his importance of winning. But you may not know that he was also committed to caring. He would throw things around the locker room at halftime. And he would also say this: if you're going to play together as a team, you've got to care for one another. You've got to love each other. Now, as a football coach, each player has to be thinking about the next guy and say to himself, if I don't block my man, Paul over there, Paul Horning, is going to get his legs broken. I have to do my job well in order that he can do his. Lombardi went on to say that the difference between mediocrity and greatness is the feelings that the guys had for each other. Friend, if you never care for Christians, or non-Christians for that matter, if you never believe that somebody is more special, more important, you're in trouble. We got to care for one another. The Bible says that the world, hear this, the world will know that we are his disciples by how much love we have for one another. Not how much Bible we know, not how much we can share, not how talented we are, but how much we love and care for one another. If you're a married couple, how you love each other will astound your kids. They're going to go to school and they're going to say, wow. Now next week, I'm going to give you a heads up for next week. You've got to be here next week. It's the most volatile service message I will ever preach in my life. I'll say this again. It's the most volatile thing I will ever talk about in my life. And no, there won't be a bed and me and my wife talking about sex. Okay? No, the most volatile thing we will ever talk about. I'm going to teach you the rules of engagement. I'm going to show you how to have a biblical argument and move on. I'm going to teach you how to have a fight next week. So bring your gloves. I'm going to teach you how to have an argument. Whether it's your spouse or your friend, and how to settle it. We're going to deal with that next week. Because this is the important things of friendships. We're in this together. Point 5. We're interconnected, not independent. There are no free agents in Jesus' territory. I'm going to talk to husbands for 1 second, because there's just a few of you in the room. Have you ever made the mistake of making an important decision without talking to your wife? Huh?
Of course.
Of course. Were there consequences? How big was that doghouse I lived in? Come on. You're smiling, so I know you were in this club together, you know? As Howard Eskin once said to a guy when he was in a flower shop, so what are you in for? You know? Listen, we're interconnected. We're not independent. This goes back to the thing. Look at the scriptures. Look at the Old Testament. Look at the New Testament. There was always community. There was an intentional community. There's intentional friendships. There was intentional organized community. There was intentional building of homes. The greatest issue that we have in America, that we have abandoned the home, that we are trying to totally mess up a church, and we have bad relationships because we don't really talk to everybody. We, if you're under 25, this is a relationship. You know what I'm saying? So the 3 key elements of relationships where God can intervene: home, church, personal lives. We're screwing up. We're not independent. The last part of verse 24 establishes this principle of interconnectedness. Your piece of the puzzle is designed to lock together with those around you in order to form a picture that was designed by the Creator. Notice again that it is God who only arranges them. In verse 18, it's God's desire for each of us, each member, to be intermingled with others. Here's the verse. But God has combined the members in the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it. The King James Version translates the word combined with hath tempered together. This word refers to mixing, commingling, coalescing 2 elements that are key to become a compound. And it's a similar idea in Genesis 24 when it talks about a man and his wife cleaving together. It's commingling a compound. God is, it's like, someone once told me, cleaving is like a weld. The weld becomes the strongest bond if it's done right. Our relationships, whether you have an accountability relationship with a friend, a church relationship, or your relationship as a couple, you're cleaving. You're commingling compounds. You are, by God's so designed and tempered, to come together and form a bond that cannot be broken. Hence the series title. I found this analogy, which is pretty cool. This family was poor and they couldn't afford a Christmas tree. And they waited till Christmas Eve and found a tree that was okay on one side, but pretty bare on the other. Then they picked another one that was pretty full in the front, but scraggly in the back. They nervously offered $3 to the salesman, hoping that he would take the money. He accepted it because no one else wanted the 2 trees. Later that night, he was walking down the street and he noticed this gorgeous tree in this couple's apartment. It was thick, it was well-rounded. He knocked on the door and asked him, how did they get such a beautiful tree out of the 2 scrubs that he sold them? The husband showed them how they worked the 2 trees closely together, where the branches were thin, and tied the trunks together. And the branches overlapped and formed a tree so thick that it could no longer see as 2, but as one. When we find our place in our personal relationships, in our church relationships, in our home relationships, it becomes one picture. Today, are you one with people? Are you one? Let me give you a couple steps as we close. 1, you need to commit to connecting with people. Listen, there's a whole series of stuff we can do in the home. You know, maybe you and your spouse There's some things you need to iron out. You need to commit to church membership. It's important. Personal relationships. Those of you who are already members, you're not a free agent. We're in this thing together, which means you need to be making friends here. You need to be forging relationships. You need to be looking for opportunity to connect to people. It's important. The second thing, you need to figure out how you fit in. You need to start investigating your personal life. And what do I mean by that? We have a spiritual gifts test. I gave it a couple years ago, and we have some new people. But you need to find out how God's wired you. How has God uniquely designed you? You need to explore that so that you can say, where do I fit in? What is God's plan for my life? What are the talents and gifts and abilities I have? I want you to do this as a third step. I want you to start praying this week and start looking in your life. Where can I connect to people? Are there people within the sphere that I'm a part of community that I can grow a deeper friendship with? Because you can't go it alone. You need to look at your wife and your husband and say, you know, we need to be praying more together. We need to be talking more together. We need to be sharing more together about this journey that we're on. We're in this together. Here's two more. It's like, this is hard for guys particularly. We don't want to look at maps. We thank God for Garland's and GPS, because men will never ask for directions. I made it to Virginia, Southern Virginia. I traveled, 1,000 miles. 504 miles down, 504 miles back. My wife has the same phone I have. We plugged hers into the dash, and we turned it on, and Alice led us there. You need to be vulnerable and say, I don't know it all. Listen, I don't have all the answers. You hear that? I'm a pastor. I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of them. We need to be vulnerable and ask for help along the way. We're in this together. Again, God's in your relationships. God's in a relationship, the relationships that you have here. You need to ask for help where you need help. And lastly, you need to invite others to discover their place. You see somebody aimlessly wandering around, you know they're a believer, you got to start talking to them. Listen, there's these God appointments that you have in your life on a daily basis. There are sheep that are wandering all over this county that have no home. They're getting devoured by wolves. You say, listen, I'm not asking you to join my church. I'm asking that we have a really cool community. Why don't you come hang with us? We'll help you find a home. Listen, I'll say this from the pulpit, and I've done this countless times. If this isn't the right place for you, I'll give you a list of 10 churches that I can suggest based upon your needs. It's not about my steeple. This is God's house. We need to help connect to people, the kingdom. We need to help connect people to the kingdom. We need to help. If you see somebody who needs a friend, befriend them, you know? If you need to see a couple that's hurting, you got to talk to them and love on them and help them, you know? It's kingdom. It's kingdom. It's kingdom. So God's in your relationships. I hope the scriptures that we've shared today has convinced your heart that God's in your home, God's in the church, God's in your personal relationships that you're building.